Last month, I was actually planning to make a video about Turtle WoW. At that time, I'd found a pretty stable guild and started running raids with them, things like BWL and MC. But right as I was getting started, Blizzard ended up winning their lawsuit against Turtle, and the Turtle WoW servers are set to shut down around mid-May. So the focus of this video kind of shifted into what it is now, just talking about my overall experience with Turtle WoW. I originally started playing World of Warcraft around 2008. Back then, the publisher transition in China hadn't fully happened yet. NetEase didn't take over until 2009. I got into the game during TBC, but throughout all of WLK, I never actually did a single raid. The main reason was pretty simple: I was still in high school, and I was at a boarding school. I could only go to an internet cafe on Saturday afternoons and play for a few hours. I didn't really start playing seriously until college. Cataclysm, MOP, and WOD are the expansions I'm most familiar with. I even started a guild with a few friends, and we managed to clear heroic raids together. One interesting thing, though, I didn't realize until after leaving China that the Chinese servers had a completely different payment model. When I was playing, it was all pay by the hour. We used prepaid time cards, and your playtime would just tick down as you played. Everywhere else, it was a monthly or quarterly subscription. And considering that back in college I was easily spending 12+ hours a day in-game, that timecard system actually cost me a lot of money. My WoW journey more or less ended shortly after Legion started. Around that time, I was playing a lot more Dota 2 and gradually lost interest in WoW. Later on, when Classic WoW came out, a lot of my friends got really into it again, but I never went back. One of the reasons was that NetEase had already switched the Chinese servers from the old timecard system to a monthly subscription. By then I was already working, and there was no way I could put in the same kind of hours as I did in college. Paying a monthly fee just felt like I'd be wasting money if I wasn't playing enough, so I ended up never logging into WoW again. Turtle WoW is the first, and so far the only, private server I've ever played on. I think I first heard people talking about it around 2020. What really caught my attention back then was pretty simple: it's a free level, 60 vanilla experience, which sounded perfect for someone like me who just wanted to see what the early days of WoW were like. The only problem was that there were no Asian servers at the time. So I didn't actually create an account until a few years later, when they finally launched an Asia server. And even then, I ended up putting it off again because I got completely hooked on Path of Exile. It wasn't until last year that I finally got into Turtle WoW for real. And just like when I was younger, I spent a long time leveling. Since I hadn't touched World of Warcraft in years, and this was also my first time playing vanilla, nothing felt nostalgic. If anything, it all felt brand new, and I had a lot to relearn from scratch. One thing that really stood out is how different vanilla's design philosophy is compared to modern MMORPGs. For example, it took me quite a while to figure out that, at least for a warrior, the most efficient way to level isn't questing at all, but just staying in one spot and grinding mobs non-stop. In the end, I basically kept moving from one area to another, farming ogres all the way to level 60. At some point, it honestly started to feel less like WoW and more like I was playing Diablo. I'd break my leveling into a few simple phases. Early on, I just followed the normal path, questing from Durotor into the Barrens, taking things pretty seriously. That worked fine until around level 30, when I hit 1000 needles and suddenly felt completely underpowered. I got stuck there for a while, and my leveling basically stalled. After bouncing between zones like Shimmering Flats and struggling with higher level mobs, I eventually moved to Earthy Highlands and pushed to around 35 through quests. That's when I fully realized something important: leveling isn't really about quests, it's about grinding mobs. Quests only make sense if they line up with what you're already killing. So from that point on, I switched approach completely, just parked myself in good spots and farmed mobs non-stop. From 35 to 39, I grinded ogres in Alterac Mountains. Then Swamp of Sorrows to 41, mixing in a few easy quests. After that, I moved to Farilas, which turned out to be one of the best zones, good quest flow, easy mobs, so I combined questing and grinding and leveled pretty efficiently. From 45 onward, it was back to pure grinding, Naga, Yetis, Harpies, basically staying in Farilas all the way to 50. After 50, I rotated between Burning Steppes, Blasted Lands, and Deadwind Pass, mostly farming ogres. By then I had my macro set up, so leveling was almost semi-AFK. Finally, at 58, I went back to questing in Eastern Plague Lands and hit 60. When I first started playing Turtle WoW, one of the first things I was told was that RMT is strictly banned. And on the Asia server, there's also a pretty unusual rule: you're not allowed to use a high-level character to boost low-level ones. That rule doesn't even exist in some of the other regions. I'm not entirely sure why the Turtle WoW team decided to enforce it here, but from what I've heard, quite a few players have been warned or even banned for doing exactly that, running lobbies through dungeons on a max-level character, or even multiboxing several accounts and train-pulling mobs to power level them. Turtle WoW also bans botting. That said, I still occasionally see what looks like gathering bots out in the open world, but the numbers seem relatively small. All of this felt pretty new to me. Back when I was playing World of Warcraft on Chinese servers, whether it was under the 9 in the early days or later under NetEase, there was basically a tacit acceptance of boosting, botting, and RMT. In fact, I still remember reading guides back then that literally taught new players how to use RMT to afford things like epic riding. Yeah, RMT had basically become part of the game loop on Chinese servers. And that's not even getting into the whole pay-for-gear scene. You could straight up hand your account over to a boosting studio, and a month later they'd give it back fully geared, decked out in BIS. At that point, you might ask, what's even the point of playing the game? Honestly, I don't really have a good answer to that. That said, I can't claim I was completely outside of that system either. Back in college, I actually ran a small side hustle doing carries, specifically gold challenge mode runs during World of Warcraft, Mists of Pandaria. So in a way, I did make a bit of money off WoW myself. In that kind of environment, Turtle WoW ended up being the first, and probably the only, time I actually played World of Warcraft the way it was meant to be played. No bots, no RMT, no GDKP runs, just a group of friendly players around your level, running dungeons together. One thing I really liked is how Turtle WoW reworked the old world. They added a lot of new low-level dungeons, and honestly, that's something I don't think Blizzard would ever do. Starting around WLK, the whole game design shifted to revolve almost entirely around endgame raiding, and the leveling process kind of lost its meaning. Then with systems like Raid Finder, a lot of players basically just level by bouncing between the capital city and instanced content. I'm not trying to sound like one of those, back in my day, players complaining about everything. Modern games are designed this way for a reason. You get a more streamlined, convenient path to the endgame, but it does come at the cost of a lot of the journey along the way. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's something kind of ironic about all this. My Turtle WoW journey basically got cut short right as it was getting started, because of Blizzard. But honestly, I don't feel like I really lost anything. What Turtle WoW gave me was a pretty unique experience, something you can't really recreate. You don't step into the same river twice. Maybe it's just age, but I don't really care much anymore about raiding or chasing endgame gear. More importantly, it made me realize that a genuinely good game community can exist. People don't have to just accept whatever Blizzard throws at them. I still clearly remember the very first time I logged into World of Warcraft. It was some weekend back in 2008, I spent the whole day downloading the game, then woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning while my parents were still asleep, created my Undead Warlock, and started leveling in Tirisful Glades. Back then, the slogan for WoW in China was, "An entire world is waiting."